Let's begin Basic Skills Review number 7, Working with Percents. For finding percents, we will eventually use a calculator to find the percent of a number, but first you need to know how to find it without a calculator. To find the percent of a number, change the percent to a decimal. You learned that in Lesson 6, in Basic Skills Review number 6. We change a percent to a decimal by moving our decimal point 2 places to the left. So to find the percent of a number, change the percent to a decimal and multiply it by the number. You should also use your common sense. Think, use your brain and decide whether the percent you are looking for is greater than or less than 50%. Most of the time you can come up with 50% of a number without doing any work because 50%, remember, means half. So once you have figured out 50%, you can use your common sense to determine whether your answer should be greater than or less than that number. Let's look at some examples. 20% of 50. Think, 50%, which is half of 50, is 25. So 20% of 50 is going to be less than 25. You could probably come up with a guess. But in order to get it exact, we need to change 20% to a decimal. Remember, we do that by moving our decimal point 2 places to the left. So we get 0.2. And then we multiply 0.2 by 50. 0.2 times 50 equals 10. I'll show you the work. Take 50, multiply it by 0.2. So 2 times 0 is 0, 2 times 5 is 10, 0 times 0 is 0, 0 times 5 is 0. We come out with 100 here, but you have one place to the right of the decimal point. So when we put that decimal point there, we get 10. All right? So 0.2 times 50 equals 10. 20% of 50 is 10. You can also use 10%, another percent that is pretty easy to determine without doing any work. Remember from our math minutes that we said when taking 10% of a number, move your decimal point 1 place to the left. So 50 becomes 5. When we start with 50, we move our decimal point 1 place to the left and we get 5. So 10% of 50 is 5. So if we want to know 20% of 50, then we take 2 times 10% because 20% is 2 times 10, right? 2 times 5 equals 10. When finding percents without a calculator, you can do the work by multiplying, or you can use what you know and your common sense or your brain to come up with the answer. It's completely up to you which you choose, but you have to be careful and know what you're doing so that you don't make any mistakes. So find 25% of 80. First, I'm going to think. 50% of 80 is 40. So half of 80 is 40. So I know that 25% is going to be less than 40. If I think real close, I know that 25 is half of 50. So 25% is half of the 50%. If we said that 50% equals 40, then 25% equals 20. Now, you can do the work and you can say 80 times 0.25 and you're going to get the exact same answer. It's completely up to you. That's an easy one to find. Let's look at number 2. Find 15% of 20. Well, 15% is not too far from 10%. I know that 10% of 20 is 2. I need 5 more percent. Half of 10%, half of 2 is 1. So 5% equals 1. That means 15% equals what? 15% equals 3. If you don't know how to use common sense to do it, take and change your percent to a decimal. 0 times 5 is 0, 5 times 2 is 10, 1 times 0 is 0, 1 times 2 is 2. I get 300, but I have 2 places to the right of my decimal point, so I'm going to move that there. So I know that 15% of 20 equals 3. So multiple ways of doing the same thing. If you're good at using your brain, you can come up with the answer without doing all of that multiplication. It's important that you learn to use your brain to do these because you're going to be taking percents of numbers for the rest of your lives. Anytime you go to the mall and there's a sale on something, and it says that you get 25% off of the full price of $100, you need to know how to figure that out. Number 3, find 50% of 100. You should never have to work out 50%. We know that half of 100 is 50. Also, anytime you take the percent of 100, it's going to be this number. So 25% of 100 is 25, 10% of 100 is 10, so on. Find 10% of 80. Well, we've already talked about 10%. We moved the decimal point 1 to the left, so 10% of 80 is 8. If you need to show work by multiplying by the decimal, that's absolutely fine. So 80 times 0.1. Here, if you had to do it, 100 times 0.5. Number 5, find 12% of 90. Now 12% is a little bit harder to use your brain for. I know 50% of 90 is 45, so I know I'm going to be smaller than 45. The easiest way to do this one is to take the 90, change your 12% to a decimal, multiply by the decimal. 2 times 0 is 0, 2 times 9 is 18, 1 times 0 is 0, 1 times 9 is 9. I get 0, 8, 10. I have 2 places to the right of the decimal point, so 10.8. So 12% of 90 is 10.8. That one's a little bit harder to come up with using your brain. Number 6, find 125% of 80. The first thing I need to know is that 100% of 80 is 80. So 125% is going to be greater than 80. So I'm going to change 125% to a decimal by moving my decimal point 2 places to the left. I get 1.25. I'm going to take 1.25 and multiply it by 80. So I have, well, I do it a little bit differently. You can do it the same way you're used to, 1.25 times 80 like this. Or anytime there's a 0, you can just pull it down and then multiply. 8 times 5 is 40. Carry the 4, 8 times 2 is 16, plus 4 is 20. Carry the 2, 8 times 1 is 8, plus 2 is 10. So I have 10,000, but I have 2 places past the decimal. So my answer, 125% of 80, is 100. Takes a little bit of work, it takes a little bit of brains, it takes some thinking. You all have the ability to do this. Please review it, think it through, use your brain, and once you've done that, I want you to go over and attempt to do the homework, 1 through 15. Remember, you can use your notes. You're not to guess. I don't want you guessing. It's okay to use your brain, use your common sense, but no guessing. You may not use a calculator. If you use your brain, I want you to show me how you used it. For example, if you say 50% of 100 is 50, so 25% of 100 is 25, I want you to show me that work. So if you use your brain, still kind of give me an idea of how you were thinking. Don't just put an answer. Anybody can get an answer. I want to know, how did you get the answer? Once you have completed homework number 7 to my satisfaction, you can move to Basic Skills Review number 8.